Let me begin by reading you a story from a book called The Heart of Change by John Kotter. John Kotter is a Harvard professor who specializes in helping organizations implement change in their organizations. And John Kotter, like any good consultant, wrote a book. And this book was called Leading Change, an 8-step process for helping organizations to lead change. Great book. You should read it. But after a couple of years, he went back and did some research and found that many of the organizations that were actually following his 8 steps weren't being successful. And he wanted to find out why. And what he went back and found out was that though they were trying to follow the steps, they weren't being necessarily successful at certain of the steps. So he went and interviewed people who were successful at each of the various steps. And in The Heart of Change, his book, he had the actual, he didn't write most of this book. This book is a compilation of stories of people who were successful at implementing a certain step in a unique and powerful way. So the story that I'm going to read to you is written by a man named John Stenger, and John Stenger is a VP of Procurement, Materials Management for a large manufacturing organization. And this is his story of how he persuaded his senior management about a change that needed to be made. So this is his story. We had a problem with our whole purchasing process. I was convinced that a great deal of money was being wasted and would continue to be wasted into the future, and that we didn't even know how much money was being thrown away. I thought we had an opportunity to drive down purchasing costs, not by 2%, but by something in the order of $1 billion over the next 5 years. A change this big meant a big shift in the process. This would not be possible, however, unless many people, especially in top management, saw the opportunity, which for the most part they did not. So nothing was happening. To get a sense of the magnitude of the problem, I asked one of our summer students to do a small study of how much we pay for the different kinds of gloves used in our factories, and how many different gloves we buy. I chose one item to keep it simple, something all the plants use and something we can all easily relate to. When the student completed the project, she reported that our factories were purchasing 424 different kinds of gloves. 424. Every factory had their own supplier and their own negotiated price. The same glove could cost $5 at one factory and $17 at another. $5 or even $17 may not seem like much money, but we buy a lot of gloves. And this was just one example of our purchasing problem. When we examined what she had found, even we couldn't believe how bad it was. The student was able to actually collect a sample of every one of the 424 gloves. She tagged each one with the price on it and the factory it was used in. Then she sorted the bags by division and firm and type of glove. We gathered them all up and put them in our boardroom one day. Then we invited all the division presidents to come visit the room. What they saw was a large, very expensive table, normally clean or with a few papers, now stacked high with work gloves. Each of our executives stared at the display for a minute. Then each said something like, "We buy all these kinds of gloves?" I would say, "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, we do." They'd say, "Really?" And I would say, "Really?" Then they walked around the table. Most, I think, were looking for the gloves that their factories were using. They could see the prices. They looked at 2 gloves that seemed exactly alike, yet one was marked $3.22 and the other $10.55. It's a rare event that these people don't have anything to say. But that day, they just stood with their mouths gaping. This demonstration quickly gained notoriety. The gloves became part of a traveling road show. They went to every division. They went to dozens of plants. Many, many people had the opportunity to look at the stack of gloves. The roadshow reinforced at every level in the organization a sense of this is how bad it really is. Through more research, again done quickly and inexpensively, we discovered that what some of our competitors were doing. The competitive benchmarking was added to the roadshow as well. As a result, we were given a mandate to change. People would say, "We must act now," which of course we did, and saved a great deal of money that could be used in much more sensible ways. Even today, people still talk about the gloves on the boardroom table. So my question for you is, why did this presenter have such success in their presentation? He had this amazing idea that was going to take a considerable amount of change in an organization. And you can imagine that each one of these plants had centralized purchasing with a centralized purchasing director and a staff, right? And all this was going to change. There was going to be a lot of political battles that this person would wage. He hadn't just thought of this. He'd been really thinking about this for years, and he'd talked about this with people. He'd shown spreadsheets, analysis of the types of savings, and yet nothing changed. And then when the gloves on the boardroom table, the message got through. This morning, you've seen a number of, or heard a number of great ideas. Ideas about what we can do as laboratory professionals to be more effective in our jobs and to impact our organizations and to impact healthcare in general. And hopefully already you have some ideas of some conversations that you believe you need to have with your administration. You've got great ideas, but you're going to have to persuade someone else in order for those ideas to become a reality. For the impact in savings, improved processes, improved patient care to become a reality, you're going to have to persuade someone else. And so my goal today is to share with you some insights that will greatly increase your chances of success in persuading others, as John Stenger was able to persuade his administration, his board, to make changes through his gloves on the boardroom table. So you have some ideas, and you go to prepare your presentation. You have ideas, you have data, you have information, and it sort of looks like this. You know you have some great insights, you know you have great information, but you're not quite sure what to do with it as you prepare your presentation. If you do it right, it'll look something like this at the end. Today I want to focus in on just 4 pieces of this puzzle that'll help you build presentations that will impact your audience the way the purchasing director impacted his audience. The first puzzle piece is to know what success looks like. To begin by knowing what success looks like before you start to put your presentation together. Think for a moment about taking a hike through a forest, as this young lady's about to do. Before she sets out on her hike, she has to know the destination. So on this map that she's looking at here, she's determining where does she want to end up and where is she now. And then her plan will be, how do I most effectively get from where I am today to where I need to be? And everything she's going to do in that hike is going to be designed to get her to the end result that she started with. Right? Stephen Covey said, start with the end in mind and work backwards. Do you know what a successful presentation will look like? First, you've got to decide, what do I want to accomplish in this presentation? And only then can you really design a powerful presentation that says, I know where I want to end up, I know where I am now, I know where my audience is now. How do I move my audience from where they are to where we need to be at the end of the presentation? In her hike, it's going to be some physical destination. Usually you want to make it back to the car, right, when you're on a hike like this, and that's your end result. You might go to some great waterfall, but you want to go to the waterfall and return back to your car safely and on time. As you prepare a presentation, most typically the objective that you're going to set for your presentation is that you want your audience to either know, do, or believe something that they wouldn't have known, wouldn't have done, or wouldn't have believed without you there to present to them. So as an example, you might want them to know something that they didn't know before. Right? And Dr. Brule talked to us this morning gave one example of many of the examples about a change in thyroid testing, or a thyroid algorithm. And so you want them to really understand that a change in the thyroid testing algorithm can save money without affecting patient care. Right? So you understand, you have this information. There's been a lot of tradition, a lot of history about a particular way. It's been done for a long time in your hospital the same way. You've got some new information, and you want them to know something that they didn't know when the presentation started. That may be your objective for that presentation. You may simply want them to approve the budget for hematology. So you're going in for a request for hematology, and you're competing against a large number of very important other acquisitions that need to be made, other expenditures that are all valuable, but you believe this is critical, has to be done, and you're going in there, and at the end of the presentation, you want them to do something, and that is to go, yes, that makes sense. We need to allocate that budget towards new hematology equipment. What is it that you want them to do as a result of the presentation? Or you may want to have them believe something that they didn't believe before, right? And that's much what Lucia Birdie was talking about this morning. So much of her presentation was really for you to believe what she was saying about quality assurance and the impact that that can make on the laboratory. And so one of the lessons that you might be making from that presentation to your administration when they've asked you to cut back your quality control and proficiency expenses is you want them to really believe that reducing QC and proficiency expenses is going to lead to a significant increase in the cost of external or internal failures. And that they have to really believe that at the end of your presentation for you then to go to the next step. So before you could even begin to understand what slides do I want to present, what data do I need to gather, you don't gather the data and then decide how to present it. You decide what do I want to accomplish, and then what data, what information, what examples, what stories do I need to provide to my audience to have them know something, do something, or believe something at the end of the presentation. If you don't start with the end in mind, if you don't have a solid objective before you begin, what you end up doing is just talking about a topic instead of getting your audience to the destination that you want them to get to. So start with the end in mind. The problem is that when we get ready to give a presentation, we focus on ourselves. So the second piece of the puzzle, once we know what success looks like, is to forget about ourselves. It's no longer about us. It's now all about the audience. So the second piece to the presentation puzzle is it's not about you. I hate to be the one to tell you that, right? But it's not about you. And this is the way you look at it. You say, all right, I've got this data that I want to share. I'm so excited. I just came back from the symposium. We got all this great data, and I want to, so I have this great information. I have a need. I need something, and I really need it for the laboratory to be successful. So I have all these needs that I need you to fill. I've got a great idea of how we can be more effective, more efficient, more productive, better patient care. I have these great ideas. I've got a problem. I got a problem with my lab, I got a problem with my staff, I got a problem with my equipment, and I need your help to be able to solve my problem. So it's all about us. But the problem is, that's how the audience views it. I don't know if your mama told you this, but my mama told me this. And it's that most people really don't care about what you want. And for those of you with a shocked look on your face, I apologize for being the one. Your mother was a good woman. Everyone should have one. But she should have told you that, right? That most people are focused on their needs. Even good people. A good hospital administrator is focused on how she views the situation, right? And how she sees her role in running the organization. And she knows what she needs and what she believes is right for the organization. And so she's focused on what she needs to run this organization well, not so much what you need. And so what we have to do then is we have to quickly draw our audience into the presentation and let them see that this really isn't about you, the speaker. It is about them. And that they need to pay attention, they need to listen, because what you're there to present is how their job will be done successfully. Because they can't be successful if all their departments aren't running successfully, right? The CEO of a hospital can only be successful if all her departments are successful. That's how the top organization operates. That's how they become successful. And so that's what you have to enable them to do. Draw them in quickly, let them see it's about them. Had a student in one of my classes like this come up to me afterwards and tell me a story. He said, you know, when you talked about that part, it really made me remember a talk that I gave one time. He said, I was speaking to a group. This was actually a physician who was speaking on behalf of a pharmaceutical company. And he said, I was doing one of these dinner talks to a pretty big group, and they were all sitting out there, and they were eating, and they were listening to my talks. I talked about a particular product and why I like to use that product, why I prescribe that product. And he said, and there was one guy right down in the front that was madly taking notes. And I was feeling pretty good. You know, that guy's getting a lot out of this presentation. He's madly writing, constantly, barely looked up, just writing. So the speaker finished his talk, and he was answering some questions, as often happens with a speaker. He's answering the questions, and then he's, most of the people had left, and he looks over, and right where that guy was sitting were his notes. And he thought, oh my goodness, the poor man forgot his notes. And as he's walking over to take a look at the notes, he's thinking, how am I going to even find out who that was? And how am I going to get him his notes that he spent so much time writing on? And as he picked up the notes, this is what the note said. Must not kill speaker, must not kill speaker, must not kill speaker, must not kill speaker, for those of you who can't read that. Apparently, he wasn't doing as good a job on this part of the presentation as he thought he was. See, the odds are stacked against you when you stand in a conference room with a slide projector and 3 or 4 administrators. The odds are stacked against you from the start. And that's true of any presentation that you give. Because you've heard the old expression, right? This is, I got a lot on my plate, right? This is not your audience's plate when you walk in. This is your audience's plate. Right? That's your audience. That's what it looks like. Before you even walk in and start your presentation, right, their plate is already full. They've got more to do, more to deal with, more to consider, more to analyze, more decisions to make than they can possibly make. And then you come in with some more. You come in with dessert, with seconds. Right? And already, this is where their mind is, right, overwhelmed with all that they have to do and all the things that are on their mind that are as important or more important than what it is that you're there to talk to them about. So what you have to do is you have to address 2 questions that are on your audience's mind immediately. Within the first few moments, your audience is asking themselves these questions, right? And these questions are, why is this important to me? So I'm an administrator sitting in this meeting, somebody from the lab's coming down to present to something, you begin to talk, and I'm asking myself, why is this important? They can cut the meeting short and leave, or they can cut the meeting short and stay. That's when they're just not listening anymore. Right? Administrators get very good at pretending to listen to presentations, but their mind is off on somewhere else because you didn't answer this question for them very quickly in the presentation. You didn't draw them in, right, to want to hear what it is that you have to say. So the first question is, why is this important to me? And the second is, how can I possibly pay attention with all the other stuff that's already on my mind, both work and personal? You think about it, if you've got a really important presentation and perhaps the success of the lab in the near future resides on the outcome of this meeting, because you need the approval or the agreement to move forward with this proposal that you believe is significantly important for the success of the lab. So you spend a significant amount of time gathering your information, preparing your presentation. You might have even gone over it with the various people in the lab to make sure that this is the most important thing you're going to probably do all week, all month. What is it for the administrators in the audience? What is it on their importance level? Just another meeting. Right? It's just another meeting that they hope gets over by 9:15 because they got to be on the other side of campus for a meeting at 9:30. And so this is why it is such a challenge. The difference in importance at the beginning of the meeting to you and to the audience is significantly different. The odds are stacked against you when you start. It doesn't mean you can't succeed. It just means you got to be good. You got to be good. I'm going to teach you how to be good at designing your presentation. And in fact, you don't even have to be really good. You just got to be better than radiology and pharmacy. Right? You just got to be a little bit better than everybody else to get what you need. Before I share that with you, though, how to do that, let's take a reading test. Now, in a moment, if you follow directions so far, there's a sealed envelope on your table. There's a sealed envelope on your table. And in a moment, I'm going to have you get that envelope, and I'm going to ask you to open it up and pass it around. And inside are some slips of paper, inside that envelope, with some writing on one side. So when I say to go, what I want you to do is just open the envelope, pass it around. Everybody take one, put it face down. Don't read it. Just put it face down on your table in front of you so I can see who has one of those. All right? So somebody grab the envelope that says do not open until you've been given instructions. You've now been given instructions. Just take out one of the sheets of paper and put it face down in front of you so I know everybody has it. All right, everybody got one? Now what I'm going to ask you to do is, in just a moment, I'll say flip it over and read it. I just want you to read it one time and then put it face down again on the table so I know everybody has done it. All right, so go ahead, read it one time, put it face down back on the table. All right, once you've read it through, just put it face down on the table, and then I'll explain the next thing that you're going to do. All right, this time, when I tell you to, you're going to flip it over, and all I want you to do is count the number of F's, like the letter F. Count the number of F's. Just read it one time, count the number of F's, flip it back over. I don't want to take a lot of time on this. Go ahead and do that. Flip it over, read the number of F's, turn it upside down. That way I'll know when everybody is done. All right, once you've read it one time, you've counted, flip it over. All right, now, we've had a little trouble with this hand thing, raising thing so far today, all right? Paul proved that you can do it, okay? So this is actually going to be a requirement for this to work, okay? So how many of you had one of the 2F cards? Raise your hand. See if we had any 2F cards. Okay, look around. There's smatter of those. Who had 3F cards? Raise your hands. Okay, look around so you kind of see what the numbers were. Were there any 4F cards in this one? Okay, all right, the 4F cards. Who had a 5F card? Okay, a lot of 5F cards. Any 6F cards? Okay, there were some 6Fs. And who had a 7F card? Okay, all right, very good. All right, I'm a little puzzled by that. Do me a favor and just give yours to somebody else and let them count it. Okay, some of you are getting the problem. They're all the same. Everyone is the exact same piece of paper. So let's do this. Let me help you a little bit. This time when you count, remember to count the F's in the word of. Go back and count and see if you can find all 7. Congratulations to the 7Fers. I'm rather offended at that, quite frankly. Right. If you don't believe me, ask the person next to you. I promise you there's 7 F's and they're all the same. Now, let me explain to you why the vast majority of you, right, all but 6 or 7, right, and they'd done this before. Don't be so smug. I see them. You can pick them out. They're kind of 7 F's first time, right? And maybe you got it. I'll give you something. But here's what happened, right? When you were a little kid, you learned to read using the what method? Hooked on phonics, right? You sound words out, which is, of course, the greatest irony in the world, because phonics is spelled P-F. How'd they do that, right? But it means you sound the words out. And F sounds like F, right? But of, phonetically, is spelled this way, UV, of. And so you are conditioned to read one way, and this always happens. 2 F'ers, 3 F'ers, it's not your fault. Miss Beasley in 2nd grade didn't do you as well as you thought she did. Right? But you learned to read phonetically, and then when I put of on the board, I reconditioned you to a new way of reading. Right? And I reconditioned you to look for the words that didn't sound like an F, phonetically, but did in fact have an F in the word. And so I reconditioned you. And to be an effective presenter, right, you have to recondition yourself to a new way of thinking as you design presentations. And I'm about to share with you the secrets to successfully persuading somebody in a presentation. The secret that most people do not understand, which is why millions of PowerPoint presentations are going on right now throughout America. Millions of people are going to awaken refreshed from those presentations. But that's about all that's going to be accomplished. You hear all this stuff, you know, I hate PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint. PowerPoint in and of itself is not evil. It has no soul. Right? There are evil people making PowerPoints, and you sit through those presentations or sleep through them every day, right? So it's no wonder when you walk in and connect your projector to or your computer to the projector that expectations are low. Low. They don't even know what you're there for, and it's low expectations. And they're right most of the time. So I want to share with you the secrets to change that and to be different and successful. Most people, when they get ready to prepare their PowerPoint presentation, think that this is what they're trying to accomplish. Get the ideas from the mind of the speaker into the mind of the audience. You have a proposal. You have some data. You have an insight that's very important, and you have it in your head, and it needs to leave the meeting in the head of the audience. If you think this way, you will fail every time, because your job is to capture the heart and the mind of the audience. You must define your presentation as capturing the heart and the mind of the audience. A presentation is the transfer of emotions. A presentation is the transfer of emotions, which must, of course, be supported by data and logic. But the purpose is not to transfer data and logic. When you go into a meeting, an important meeting, and you have some emotion about what it is that you're presenting, if it's significant, and this is an important issue that needs to be addressed in the organization, you feel some way about what you're going to talk about. You might be nervous about it. How will this be received? You might be excited about the possibilities for the organization if this were implemented. You might be fearful that if we don't do this, what is the future going to look like? What's going to happen to the next patient that has that exact same scenario? We got lucky this time because somebody caught it by mistake. But I'm fearful for that next patient. You're optimistic. You might be optimistic because of the money that could be saved and put to better uses. The more rapid turnaround, the way we could serve our patients or our physicians. You might be optimistic about this idea that you're bringing in. You might be angry. We're wasting so much money on things that don't matter. That's not, that's not responsible. We're not being responsible. So you might be angry about what's going on and what it is that you're going to present, or worried. But if it's an important issue that you have some emotions, your job is to get the audience feeling the same way you do and seeing the logic behind your suggested action. At the end of the presentation, you want to transfer the emotions that you have and what drove you to believe this is such a high priority and this must change. That has to be residing in the audience so that they see this as a critical issue that has to be addressed, or an enormous opportunity that can't be missed. If you don't transfer those emotions, then you won't succeed. That's where you end up with, we agree that that's a significant issue, it just falls below the line. It's important, but not important enough to do something, to take the resources to address it. You can lose your audience with poor logic and unsupported claims, but you cannot win them over without emotions. You cannot win your audience over if they don't feel that this is the right thing to do. This is true of all people. You're saying, well, you've never met Dr. Patel. It's true of Dr. Patel. It's true of all people in all professions, from kids to senior citizens, from circus clowns to surgeons. We're all wired the same in this regard. You only have, if all you've got is data to relate, cancel the meeting and send a report. Why are we having a meeting if it's just the transfer of data? In fact, written communication is a better way to transfer data and information. Face-to-face is the best way to transfer emotions that are supported by logic and data. Some of you are still doubting me. If all it took was logic, no one would smoke. No one would smoke. We've got smokers in this room, you've got smokers on your staff, right? So forget the subset of illiterate people, of the guy on the side of a mountain in Tibet that's never read. Put those outliers aside. Let's just take the vast majority of people in the United States. Very few of them do not have access to the data that there seems to be a pretty strong correlation between smoking and bad stuff, right? That's pretty well known. Yet, many intelligent, informed people still smoke. In fact, many people go to college. They got into a great college, they're really smart, got good grades in high school, got good SATs. They go to college and start smoking. Right? Where I'm from, we all started smoking when we were 6. But now, right? Because that's what we did. Bubba's doing it. But now we have people that actually are so intelligent, and they still start smoking. 5% of physicians in the United States smoke. 5% of physicians in the United States smoke. 30 to 40% internationally smoke. That says it's not an information or data, right? It's the culture. Right? More people smoke in lots of other cultures than do in the United States, and the physicians that reside in that culture have more of a tendency to smoke. In fact, when people finally do quit smoking, it's rarely because they read a new white paper. Well, I'll be darned. It's peer-reviewed. Smoking's bad. Never knew that. That's not that's not why you quit smoking. You quit smoking. Why might a friend of yours or somebody, why might somebody quit smoking finally after all those years? Heart attack for themselves, so all of a sudden it became real. So some physical thing happened, all of a sudden it wasn't theoretical anymore. It became real. What else? So somebody they know, somebody they know has an adverse effect, cancer, something like that. And children, I heard somebody say, I had a lot of people tell me, they're looking at it, smoking, they're 25, 28, whatever it is, they have their first kid, they start smoking in college, they're smoking several years, and the baby comes home, and they look in that little bassinet, and they say, you know what, I want to be here for, little Jock Jr., or my daughter, Jocketta, little Jocketta. My wife wouldn't let me name either of my kids, Jock Jr. or Jocketta. Lovely woman, but I don't know why she wouldn't do it. So I look at little Jacquetta and I say, you know, I want to be here for you. I want to be here, see you walk down. I want to walk you down the aisle, right? All those kind of things, and maybe those are the kind of things. All of a sudden, no new data. Right? It was a transfer of emotions supported by data and logic. In that case, we'd had the data and logic for 25 years, but the emotional transfer was what caused action. And remember, that's what you're looking for. That's why you're in that meeting, is not to present. You're in to produce action. And you can't act without the approval, the budget, the support, the resources, whatever it is. You wouldn't be in that meeting if you could do it on your own. This is something where you need others. And the only way you're going to make the impact on the healthcare organization or on patient care that you want to make is by influencing others to act the way that you so clearly see that they need to act. It's not a transfer of data, it's a transfer of emotions supported by data. Now, how do we know this is true? Because it's rooted in biology. It's rooted, not psychology, it's rooted in biology. There's an author named Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, Simon Sinek. He wrote a book called Start With Why. You can watch a YouTube video if you don't like to read. All right? Google Simon Sinek, Start With Why. You'll see him give a short version of this. And I'm going to take the information because he has encapsulated it so much better than I've ever seen it encapsulated before to simplify why this occurs and why it's rooted in biology. So if we take your brain and we do a cross-section, right? Very roughly, we end up with a couple of regions of the brain that are of significance for what we're talking about here today. And the outer region is the neocortex, right? The neocortex. And scientists and people call this the evolved brain. Differentiates us. Much of what the differentiation from animals is because of what happens in the neocortex, and animals don't have a neocortex. Its logic is here. Data analysis takes place in the neocortex. Language resides in the neocortex. Processing information all resides in the neocortex. If we then go into the center region of the brain, we have the limbic system, or the limbic brain. And the limbic brain is where emotions reside. It's where language resides. I'm sorry, it has no capacity for language. Language is in the neocortex. There's no capacity for language, which explains why we have trouble putting our feelings into words. That's why we end up saying things like, I know I read the study, but it just doesn't feel right. That we don't have capacity for language in the part of the brain that controls our emotions. That's why we say it doesn't feel right. My gut. Well, it's not your gut, it's your limbic system. I have a hunch. That's your limbic system. This is also where decisions are made. Decisions are made in the part of the brain that controls emotions and has no capacity for language. And what most presenters do is they present to the neocortex and not to the limbic system. So your audience is able to comprehend, process, understand massive amounts of data and then not do anything with it. So we have to speak to the limbic system. We have to speak to the part of the brain that controls decision-making and doesn't have a capacity for language. So we have to design our presentations completely different than the average presenter who fails most of the time to achieve the full objective of what they're trying to achieve does. Because we don't want to speak to the limbic system. We want to transfer, to the neocortex. We want to speak to the limbic system. It's a transfer of emotions that must be supported with data and logic. So what we do is we make decisions emotionally, and then we either throw them out or keep them based on the analysis of the data and logic. That's why some of you drive cars and live in houses you can't afford. Right? Because you made that decision with your heart and then you rationalized it. Well, that Beamer's a safe car. Safety rated, right? And convertibles really don't flip as much as everybody says they do. Right? So you rationalized it. It had to make sense to you logically. And that's why the others of you chose not to do that. right? Because you analyzed it and the data and logic didn't support the emotions, and you chose not to do that. So it's got to affect both, yet most of the time we just speak to the neocortex. So people understand it, they ask intelligent questions, they're right there with us, but then they don't feel moved to act, to reprioritize this over something else, to take a risk. And that's what they've got to do in order to change. So step number 1 is know what success looks like. Step number 2 is to remember it's not about you. And step number 3 says if they don't have a problem, they don't need a solution. If they don't have a problem, they being the audience, they don't need a solution. Go ahead and read that real quickly. No, you don't have to count anything. Just read it. What's the author talking about? What? I heard somebody say it. Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus. Let's read it again. With hot gems financing him, Christopher Columbus, our hero bravely defied all scornful laughter that tried to prevent his scheme. What was his scheme? Right? Go around the world. Your eyes deceive, he said. An egg, not a table, correctly typifies this unexplored planet. What's that mean? World is round, right? Now, 3 sturdy sisters sought proof. Who are the sturdy sisters? Whoa, right. We didn't talk about long-term memory from 7th grade, but you remembered that. Good for you, right? The ships that they were sailing on, right, sought proof. Forging along, sometimes through calm vastness, yet more often very turbulent peaks and valleys. What were the peaks and valleys? Waves, right? Days became weeks as many doubters spread fearful rumors about the edge. The edge of what? The earth, right? At last, from nowhere, welcomed winged creatures appeared. Who are the winged creatures? Birds, signifying momentous success. Why do birds signify success? Land. Birds don't fly around in the middle of the ocean, right? Birds fly close to land, so we must be successful. We must have reached our goal as we approached land. So the first time you read it, most of you, it was just gibberish, didn't make any sense. But then a couple people shouted out Christopher Columbus, and what did that do? Context. It gave you context. And so as you read it in context, what seemed irrelevant and really not applicable to you, not important, all of a sudden became clear when it had a context. So the lesson for us when we go to design our presentation, we've got all those puzzle pieces and we're trying to figure out where do I start, what do I talk about first, right? Is before you get to the proposal or your idea or your recommendation or your request for funds, before you get to that part, right, the audience ought to be screaming, we got to do something. That's where they need to be before you say, so therefore my recommendation is, right, there has to be context for your solution. The audience has to be prepared for you to say, I understand why we have this problem, what this tremendous opportunity is. Then you come forth with your recommendation, and it's in context. If you just start with the presentation, there's no context. There hasn't been the emotional transfer. If we start out with the problem or the opportunity or the challenge and really spend time building that and growing that and helping them to understand the depth of the problem, the severity of the problem, then when we come back with a solution, a recommendation, an answer, right, then it's in context. So what your audience needs to be at the point where they are feeling what you're feeling, where their emotions are similar to your emotions, they're worried, they're concerned, they believe that they're optimistic, right? As you say, so here's how I recommend that we address it. They still may resist your solution, but at least you've got a shot if they're convinced that something has to change, that there's a problem that has to be addressed. And so we may end up in a negotiation or along that line, but you're much you've increased the likelihood of success significantly if they recognize there is a problem that needs to be addressed, and then you have your recommendation. Remember the gloves on the boardroom table. That's what that story was about. That for some reason pie charts and Excel spreadsheets didn't connect emotionally with those vice presidents of the various divisions. But somehow when they saw the gloves on the table, and when they looked at the gloves from their factory and the other gloves, and they saw there was an $8 difference in those gloves, right, all the logic that they'd heard before now connected with them emotionally. And then the data and logic supported that. There's a process called the persuasion equation. And if you're going to say it, you have to say it like that. The persuasion equation. Right? The persuasion equation. And the persuasion equation is this. Before you're going to buy or do anything, your need to do it has to be greater than or equal to the cost of doing it. You do this all the time when you shop. You may not even realize you're doing it, but as you shop and you look at an item, not like a gallon of milk or a quarter Pepsi or something like that, because you just know you're out of that, you grab it, you throw it in the cart. But then when you look at something new or different, you take the item, you look at the price, and you, at some level, say, is my need for this greater than or equal to the cost? This is what your audience is doing as you're proposing your solution. They're saying, is our need to do this greater than or equal to the cost of doing it? I'll give you an example. Let's say that you went to get your prescription filled at the Walgreens. So you get your prescription, you go up front to pay for the prescription, and you're standing at the checkout line, and there's all those point-of-sale items, and you're looking, you go, oh, I didn't know they broke up. You're reading the magazines. And, ooh, she has gained a few pounds. So you're going through that. Right next to that's Christmas tree air freshener and a lighter and all the stuff they have right there by the front. And you see a 2-pack of AA batteries, right? And you go, I think the flashlight is dead. The flashlight, I think, is dead. Last time I used it, I think it was really dim, and it takes 2 AA's, and I ought to get some AA batteries. So you pick the batteries up, 2-pack of AA batteries at the Walgreens checkout counter, and you look at the price and you say, is my need for this greater than or equal to the cost of buying these? Now, let me ask you this. Is a 2-pack of AA batteries at the checkout line at Walgreens the cheapest way to buy batteries? No. Go down to Sam's Club, get you a pallet of batteries. You're going to save a ton of money. Right? I mean, everybody knows that, right? So you say, oh, that's crazy. And you put it back. You go, I'm going to be over by Bulk Club a little bit later this week, and I'll pick up some batteries over there, right? So your need was not greater than or equal to the cost. All right, fast forward. We're in Indiana here. They had a lovely winter this year, for those of you that are from here, and they probably went through this several times. So, the Doppler alert, Snowmageddon is coming. And so everybody has to quickly run out and get what? Milk and bread. No one knows why we get milk and bread. I suspect it's because that's what Mama did. Right? Mama went out and got milk and bread. So anyway, so we go out, we get the last milk, we knock over some old lady on a walker to get the last bread, and we're at the checkout counter, right? And we see the 2-pack of batteries, and you say, oh, who'd have thought she'd ever gone into rehab? And so then we say, you know what? I think the batteries are dead in the flashlight. And they said thousands, hundreds of thousands are probably going to lose power in this storm. And we look at the batteries and we say, oh, man, what a ripoff. Who buys them at this price? You do, right? And you put them in the cart. Why? What changed? The need, right? The need in comparison to my alternatives at that moment. Right? So in that particular setting, my need was greater than or equal to the cost, and I bought them. The quality of the product didn't change. The shelf life of the batteries didn't change. Nothing changed except my need. And so this is a variable. It's situational. Really, that's what that last example showed, is it's situational. So as you're presenting and you're showing your proposal and the costs associated with that and these sorts of things, your audience is asking themselves, is my need greater than or equal to the cost of implementing this change? If you start your presentation, well, let me show you how this would look in a different way. So here's the persuasion equation. I've just drawn some boxes there. Let's say that you're sending C. difficile out to a lab. So you're sending it out instead of doing it in your hospital laboratory. Turnaround time is long, but it's cheap. Right? It's inexpensive to send it out, but the turnaround time is long. You want to bring it in-house on one of the easier, newer sort of molecular platforms that we couldn't have done a couple of years ago, but now we could possibly do this in-house in our laboratory with a molecular test. The cost of C. difficile testing will go up significantly, right? But you believe that the overall cost to the hospital in quickly isolating the correct patients, right, and catching those patients who perhaps entered the hospital already with an infection, right, is going to be huge. A huge savings overall and a huge benefit to the patients if we can isolate the right patients and protect the other patients. If you start your presentation with the solution, hey, the reason I'm here today to talk to you is about bringing in C. difficile testing on a molecular platform. Isn't that really expensive? Well, the testing will go up. We're going to need to increase the budget for testing. We don't have any. I thought you were supposed to reduce your. Does that sound familiar to anybody that's ever been in a presentation? Right? It's because you started with the cost rather than with the need. If you start your presentation with the solution, right, then as you're explaining it, your audience is focused on the cost of implementing the solution. So cost isn't just money, right? It's time, it's risk. What if we do this and it doesn't work? What if what if this molecular stuff isn't as easy as everything I've read about it and we really can't do it? Do we have specialized people? All right, so there's risks associated with there. We're going to have to, if we significantly increase your budget for C. difficile testing, but we significantly reduce some of the infection control budget, we're going to have to shift and transfer budgets, and what kind of doors might that open? There's another risk, right? Sort of a political risk, right? We're going to have to change the algorithm, perhaps, of how we test, and the doctors don't want to change. That we're going to have to educate the physicians on this. So there's all these costs. So if the need is small, right, and they've probably heard molecular testing is more sensitive and it's better and it's the wave of the future. It's not that they think this is a stupid idea. So they got some need for it. They understand the dramatic costs and terrible impact of C. diff or any other hospital-acquired infections. They get that. So they have this small need and this huge cost. It's kind of like, I call that cost of solution the butt box. I really should come up with a better name for it than that. But the reason I call it the butt box is it's whatever your audience is thinking after they say, yeah, but, I understand that would be a good idea, but it's too expensive, it's too time-consuming, it's too risky, we've got too many other things going on, where would we get the resources, right? And that's the cost. So if you start with your solution, and this is where they end up, a small need and a large cost, you end up just negotiating the cost. You're trying to shrink the cost budget. Well, maybe we could bring in some of it. Maybe we could do it over a period of time, right? And you're trying to shrink that cost budget because remember, the cost has to be equal to or greater than or smaller than the need. What's the other? Go back. You went back to 7th grade history to come up with the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Go back to 7th grade algebra. What's the other way to get the equation in balance? Increase the need, right? Because if I increase the need, I don't have to shrink the cost. And everything that you do to shrink the cost is probably giving up on some of the things that you know are important. Think about this. Don't raise your hand. Well, that's not a problem with this group. If you have you ever had the situation where you they're asking you to give up some things. Well, we can't give you the 50,000, we could give you 30,000. We can't give you 2 head count, we could give you 1 head count. We can't give you 8 months, but we could give you 6 months. And so you agree to all that stuff in desperation, and then your idea doesn't work because it's underfunded, understaffed, and unrealistic deadlines. And so what was a great idea and would have worked had you had the budget, had the staff, and had the time, now doesn't work. I think you're worse off than you were before if you had just been told no, because now your credibility is shot for the next time. So you want to be very careful about giving in on the costs if you've really calculated that this is what we have to do to make this work. Right? So grow the need before you present your solution so that the audience really sees a significant need for change before they look at your solution. And the final step is after you've known what success looks like, you know that it's not about you. Right? It's okay for it to be about you when you're designing your objective. Your objective really is about you. What do you want them to know, do, or believe? That's what you need them to know, do, or believe. That really is about you. But the next 3 pieces of the puzzle is about forgetting about you and saying, what do I need to get them, to give them, in order for me to get what I need? And so the final step is that if there's no tension, there's no movement. Your goal in a presentation with administration is to create tension. Your goal in a presentation with administration is to create tension, as I have just done with you when I say that. As I say that, most of you are thinking that the whole goal of with administration is to avoid tension. The whole idea in a relationship is to avoid tension, right? We all got to work together. And what I'll tell you is, if that's your view, you'll fail miserably. We often look at tension as a bad thing. Right? We think of tension as a bad thing, but I want you to change the way you think of tension. Tension's not a bad thing. Tension is a force to accomplish things. This sailboat and the people on it are having a great day because there's tension in their sails. If there's no tension in the sails, you can't sail. You just sit and drink beer. It's not a bad thing, but it's not sailing. Tension is a force that produces change. Too little tension, if I want to sail, is a bad thing. On the other hand, too much tension creates bad things as well. So I want us to rethink how we look at tension and how we need to produce tension to create a force that produces change and allows the audience to take action. Now, you know, it's interesting they gave me this like after lunch spot. You notice Henry and Kurt took the right after lunch. I took the glucose curve part. Right? So if you've not been paying attention the last couple of minutes, I want you to refocus now because I'm fixing to save your marriage. All right? Who said too late? Oh, all right, I'm fixing to save your next marriage then, all right? So stick with me on this one, all right? Because I'm fixing to save your marriage. I hate to pick out one slide and say it's most important because it makes all the other slides feel bad. But if I have to, I will. And if I was only allowed one slide in all of interpersonal relations training and teaching and speaking that I do, this would be the slide. Right? It's as important in your personal relationships as it is in your business relationships with your employees, with your coworkers, with administration. But let's start with personal relationships first, make it a little more interesting, and then we'll come back to our business relationships. Let's say that a husband and a wife get in a fight. what might that fight be over? Money. That's always the answer. There's one other answer, but we're going with money. Right? So, what was I talking about? I forgot. All right. So, it's money. That's what it is. All right. So, it's money. So lots of husbands and wives fight over money. And it makes sense. Think about it. It's in limited supply. Very few of us have more than we can possibly use, right? So it's in limited supply for almost all of us. It is really important to be able to do the things we need to do in life. Not only fun stuff like vacations and nice cars and things like that, but even just to eat and have a safe roof over our head and things like that. That costs a lot of money. Eating costs a lot of money. So, you know, it's a very critical resource for our family. It's in limited supply. And then add to it that you and I, husband and wife, come from significantly different backgrounds, right? Maybe socioeconomically, so I didn't have any money and you had lots of money. Or even if we're from the same sort of socioeconomic background, my parents viewed money very differently and how you handle money and those kind of things than your parents did. And we learned so much from our parents growing up. So it's not surprising at all that married couples have a lot of disagreements over money. Right? So we'll say it's money. Suppose that my wife and I just put the kids to bed. It's 11 o'clock at night, put the kids to bed, let the dog out, let the dog back in, cleaned everything up because the cleaning lady's coming tomorrow. I never did understand that, 30 years of marriage. But I do it, right? But I do it. And so it looks good when she gets there. So you know, we got the house cleaned up. I'm heading up the stairs. There's my bed. I can see my bed. I'm walking toward it. And my wife says, oh, I forgot to pay the Visa bill. And I said, well, let's pay it tomorrow. She says, due at midnight. And we're not paying another late fee. And I said, oh, all right. So we walk downstairs, flick on the light. All right, I get the bill box. I dump out the bills on the table. I start looking for the Visa bill. All right, I find the Visa bill, open up the Visa bill, and I look at it and I say, Saks Fifth Avenue, $500? What's that? And she said, well, you knew I was shopping for the kids. And I said, how many kids do we have? And she grabs it out of my hand, and she says, Bass Pro Shop, $300. And this is what actually happened. I'd take a little stall like that, and I say, well, you knew I was going on a fishing trip. You said I'd go on the fishing trip with my buddies. She said, yeah, but I thought the money that we budgeted for that was for the trip. And I said, well, how can I go fishing without fishing equipment? But you had fishing equipment not to go to this place. And you know, she says something, and I say something, and she says something, and I say something about her mother, and she says something about my brother that drinks too much, and all of a sudden, we're in what we call the defend-attack spiral. The defend-attack spiral is this. The best defense is a good offense, right? So I say, Saks Fifth Avenue, $500. She feels attacked. I wouldn't know why. She feels attacked, right? And so she then says something and attacks me back. And I feel attacked, and I attack her back, and we're in this defend-attack spiral. And we're all the way over here, like I said, talking about my brother that doesn't usually drink too much at Thanksgiving, but occasionally. And the Visa bill's sitting over there. Are we in low productivity or high productivity at this particular point? In the financial workings of our home, right? Because the clock's moving towards midnight all the while, right? Right? And the interest fee. So we're at too high attention, right? The end of the arrow there, right? We're at too high attention. That's what we think of tension, and that is bad. We're saying things that shouldn't be said. We're not getting the Visa bill paid. We're staying up late, and then we're going to be tired and cranky in the morning. This is too much tension, right? Because it looks like this. Let me show you with the curve, right? Too much tension, and productivity is very low. So I say, fine, put the minimum on it, and we'll deal with it next month. We shoot on the tension line. We shoot all the way from too much tension, right, down to very, very low tension because I've solved the problem. Fine, put the minimum on it. We'll deal with it next month. Does anybody know how long it takes to pay off a $2,500 Visa bill if you put the minimum payment on it every month? Yeah, some of you know exactly how long it takes, right? It takes about 20 years, right? And you actually have paid about double. So that $1,500 big screen TV you bought, shrewd move putting it on the Visa. 15 years you're going to own it, and it will have only cost you $3,000, right? Is that high productivity or low productivity in your family finances? It's low productivity, right? It's low productivity. So interestingly, the tension got low, but it only got low because we didn't address the problem. Many of you sit in meetings and the tension is low because nobody's talking about what needs to be talked about. Right? And so you leave the meeting and everybody says, so we're all in agreement, says the leader of the meeting, and everybody goes, crump, crump, yes, we're all in agreement. And we leave and you go, Sue, come in my office for a minute. Shut the door. What was going on in there? Well, why didn't anybody speak up? Right? As if you weren't in the meeting. Why didn't anybody speak up? Right? So tension was low, but productivity was very low. So what I want you to think about with productivity and tension is not that the absence of tension is good. What instead we see is there's this mid-range, right, that says that there is an area of tension which is a force that produces action. And that's where in your presentations we need to be. People need to be a little uncomfortable. Because if they're not a little uncomfortable, they're not feeling the emotions. There's no transfer of emotions. They should be a little bit worried about this if you're worried about it. They should be a little concerned about what might happen the next time that happens, just like you're concerned about it. And that's tension. And if you don't create that tension, and if you're afraid to bring up things that need to be brought up because it'll create a little bit of tension, right, then there's not going to be the transfer of emotions. Let me go back one last thing to save your marriage before we move on to business, right? That spot in the middle is where your marriage is made, right? It's certainly not made in a fight where you're calling each other names and you're saying things that you shouldn't say and you're going to regret. That certainly doesn't strengthen your marriage. But down at the low tension doesn't either. Right? It's great. You ought to sit on the couch, put your arms around each other, watch The Notebook, you know, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. It's nice every once in a while, but I tell you, that will not form the bond that will withstand the struggles that you're going to face down the road. Right? What's going to form the bond that will sustain you in the difficult times is that productive tension when side by side you face the difficult financial situation that you're in. You say the tough questions, right? Like, you know, when we first got married, we said one of the most important things for us was to send the kids to college and that we wanted to pay for that. We haven't put any money in the college fund in the last 3 years. I mean, we got to sit down and say, is that still, you know, was that a foolish thing to say when we were 23 and we really didn't know anything, or is that still important? And if it is, then something else has got to give. And, you know, that's not going to be a great conversation, but it's going to be a productive conversation, not only in your family finances, but in your relationship as well. That's where you need to be is in that productive tension. And that's the same with your business relationships, right? That you need to be in that productive tension with your administration, with your staff, addressing the difficult issues, and to become skillful at keeping it from going to too high of tension, right? To be able to gracefully pull it back, to be able to say things and phrase things in such a way that it doesn't put people on the spot, doesn't make them defensive. Maybe you say that in a private meeting instead of in the staff meeting so that tension doesn't get too high. Right? So the better you can become at figuring this out. You live on one side of that tension curve or the other. Either you generally live in low tension, where you know you're not a debater, you really like everybody to get along, you understand that we get everything done by working together as a team, that you just don't like to ruffle people's feathers, you kind of hope things will just go away and get better. You know, either that describes you or the other side, the high tension, where you just say it like it is. You speak the truth, and if people can't handle the truth, that's not your problem. You're just saying what it is. You kind of enjoy debating and going back and forth. That's not a problem for you. You kind of enjoy that. That doesn't describe you perfectly, but one of those two describes you a little bit more than the other one if I forced you to pick one. Right? And what you need to learn to do, if you live in high tension, you need to learn to be a little bit more graceful about the way you say things. And if you live in low tension, you need to have the courage to speak up, right? And to bring it into productive tension. So in my C. difficile example, you might be worried about creating tension with infection control or finance, right? Because you're stepping out of your normal area of responsibility for the lab. But if you don't create some tension, nothing is going to happen, right? People have to feel uncomfortable with the status quo. Because if the status quo is not uncomfortable, then other things will take the priority and your issue won't get addressed. Do it in a way that doesn't get others to get too defensive and argumentative, but a little defensive is probably okay. And the other thing you have to do is you have to finish strong. Finish strong in your presentation. To say, thanks for your time. So that's all I have. Okay, I'll let you all get back to work now. Right? That's not finishing strong. Right? That's not finishing strong. Think back to the very beginning of your preparation. The very first thing was, what do I want people to know, do, or believe? Right? The whole purpose of the presentation was action, was to take action. And so your conclusion of your presentation, right, has to be to ask for the next step. This will be a little productive tension for you because you may not feel comfortable. If you've done a good job of laying out your case, if you've spoken to the limbic system, if you've built the need so that there's agreement on the need for change, then it'll be a productive tension. You know, I would even say, if you think about this, if you can't gain agreement on the need for change, stop the presentation at that point. If the audience doesn't even see what you see as a need to change, why would you then go forward with your recommendation? Because you're making a recommendation that has cost, time, risk, labor associated with it to an audience who doesn't even think there's anything really wrong with things the way they are. So there have been many times where I haven't shown the last 5 slides. I've just, we've gotten into a big discussion about this and we've realized that nobody sees the need for change and it's not time for me to show the proposal. I got to go back and work more through the system on developing the need for change. But if you have gotten the audience to gain agreement and understand that there is a need for change, right, then ask for the objective, or perhaps a new objective has emerged. In the course of the discussion, maybe you realize we're not quite ready to go to here, so you might say, well, then let's all agree we're going to meet again next week for an hour, and I'll have gathered some more information and some of those examples that you asked. I'll have more specifics. So even if there wasn't a recognition of the need for change, don't leave it just hanging there. Ask for whatever it is that you believe is the next step in this process. And if you have, so will you form a team to recommend the new C. diff testing protocol? If you're not the one that's able to do it, and if in your organization there would always be some team formed to review it with physicians and laboratorians and other people on it, then maybe that's what you're asking for. So can we get your approval to form the team to look into the recommendations? Don't be afraid of no. No is okay. In fact, if you get no, at least you know that you have asked for the next step. Because if you get no, at least you have a chance to say, why? What else would you need to see? At least you can handle the questions, the concerns, the issues either there or at another meeting down the road. The worst answer is, well, thanks, we'll Think about it, right? And you say, you know, would you like me to leave you these handouts or shall I throw them away for you? Right? Because that's not how you want to answer. I'd rather know that I have failed because then I can go back and keep working on it than to wonder if I've succeeded. And so that's why I want you to raise the productive tension yourself at the end of the meeting and specifically ask, can we do what it is that I've requested? Will you approve, or whatever you've set out as the next step in your presentation? Don't be afraid of no. So as we begin to wrap up for today, my goal was to get you to understand and believe that these are the 4 keys to solving the puzzle of powerful presentations. Right? That before you start to build your presentation, right, make sure you got a clear objective. How can you know whether you're successful or not if you don't even know specifically what you were trying to accomplish? Focus on what's important to the audience. What do they need to be persuaded, not what are you interested in talking about? Right? It's all about them. What do they need to hear rather than what do you want to say? Ensure they fully understand the challenge that the organization faces before you make your recommendation. Hold off. Make them wait for your recommendation, your approach, your solution until they're fully aware of the issue, the challenge, the opportunity that your proposal addresses. And don't be afraid to create productive tension. It's within that productive tension that action takes place. Action only occurs when there's tension, and we need to take action. If everything's comfortable, then there's no need for action. Certainly not action that has risk, time, effort, and money involved. Incorporate these 4 things into your presentation preparation, right? And you're going to dramatically impact your success. Whether that's a formal PowerPoint presentation or whether you're just sitting down in someone's office one-on-one, everything that I told you about today applies in a one-on-one informal discussion and formatting it exactly the same way as it does if you had to kind of more formally get up and present in a boardroom with 4 or 5 people. It applies on that spectrum of presentations. You know, I'm from North Carolina, and Maya Angelou made that her home for the last 20 or 30 years at Wake Forest University. Had passed away a couple of weeks ago. She was a poet, an author, a civil rights leader, a brothel owner, an amazing background that this woman had. And this is my favorite quote from her. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That's the transfer of emotions. If they forget exactly the facts of your presentation, but they feel that change has to occur, if they leave that meeting worried, that's good. They may not remember all the facts, they may not remember all the issues, but they will know how you made them feel in that meeting. And your job is to get them to feel the way at the end of the presentation you felt at the beginning of the presentation. And the secret to effective presenting is to capture both the heart and the mind of your audience. So go make great presentations. Thank you.